Have you ever felt like you're just drifting? Like you're walking through life, doing everything you're supposed to do, but deep down, you feel disconnected, lost, like something's missing, but you can't quite name it. Sometimes we wait for a big moment to shake us awake. But what if the message we need is already right in front of us, hidden in a story, a moment, a voice? This is one of those stories. A wise monk, a strange encounter, and a lesson so powerful it didn't come from books or gurus, but from a place you'd never expect. So, if you're feeling stuck, uncertain, or just tired of pretending you're okay, let this story be your wake-up call. Life, the greatest teacher. We often overlook on our journey through life. We all ask ourselves at some point, who is the greatest teacher I've ever had? Some might name their parents, school teachers, or mentors, but few realize that life itself, in all its simplicity, unpredictability, and even pain, is truly the greatest teacher we will ever know. One quiet afternoon at a peaceful monastery, a group of young disciples sat around their wise old master, eager to hear one of his life teachings. Gently, one of them asked, "Master, you've told us so many stories, but you've never shared who taught you. Who was your teacher?" The master smiled warmly. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at the golden sunset sky. Then, in a calm, thoughtful voice, he replied, "I didn't have just one teacher. Every person I've met, every moment I've lived, life itself has been my greatest teacher." It wasn't just an answer, it was a realization. We often think that only the wise and well-educated can teach us something meaningful. But sometimes it's a child, a small animal, or even someone we would normally judge, who ends up teaching us the most powerful lessons. Because life doesn't teach through theories. It teaches through experience. It teaches through failure, through a hug in the middle of heartbreak, through a look that makes us realize we were wrong. Life teaches with raw truth, no sugarcoating, and often its tests don't come with second chances. Most of the time, we don't even realize we're learning until we've already grown past the pain. It's only in looking back that we say, "Oh, that's what I needed to learn that day." If you can listen, if you can feel, if you can set your ego aside for a moment, then every single day becomes a step forward. You grow wiser, stronger, and more compassionate. So instead of searching for a perfect teacher, maybe the better question is, what is life trying to teach me today? If a child can teach a master monk the meaning of humility, then what is life trying to teach you right now that you might not be seeing yet? Keep listening. The master's second teacher may surprise you. A lesson from a candle. When humility begins, true wisdom can grow. When we think of a wise teacher, we often imagine a scholar, someone older, full of profound words and deep philosophies. But sometimes the most powerful lessons come from a child with innocence and just a few seconds of silence. In the early days of his spiritual journey, the old monk in this story was proud. Proud of his discipline, proud of his knowledge. He believed his understanding was enough to enlighten anyone, and he rarely listened to others with an open heart. Deep down, he thought he already knew everything he needed to know. One evening, he walked through a small village and saw a young boy holding a candle, walking toward the temple. Curious, and with a touch of arrogance, he decided to test the boy, perhaps to show off a little. He asked, "Son, when you left your house, this candle wasn't lit. Can you tell me, where did the light come from? It was a question meant to confuse, a riddle disguised as wisdom. But the boy didn't hesitate. He simply blew out the candle and asked, "Now that the light is gone, can you tell me where it went?" The monk was stunned. He couldn't answer, not with all his years of study, not with all the scriptures he'd memorized. That one quiet moment held a truth deeper than all his words. In that instant, he realized, pride is the wall that blocks real learning. When we believe we already know everything, there's no room to grow. But when we become humble, when we're willing to listen and be challenged, we take the first true step toward wisdom. That child, without any title, without formal teachings, became his first real teacher. Because it wasn't about the knowledge the boy had, but the mirror he held up. And from that moment on, the monk began to see the world not as something to explain, but something to learn from, with curiosity, with openness, with humility. If a child could silence a wise man, is it possible that your own pride is blinding you from a lesson life is trying to teach you right now? Keep listening, because the monk's second teacher wasn't even human. A lesson from the dog. Fear doesn't live outside of us, it lives in our minds. On the path of self-discovery, some lessons don't come from sacred texts or great masters. They come from the most ordinary moments in life. One day, the monk in this story learned one of his most powerful lessons from a stray dog. That day, he was traveling from one village to another. The sun was high, and he was thirsty. As he passed a small pond in the middle of a field, he saw a skinny dog trying to drink from the water. But something strange happened. Every time the dog approached the pond, it suddenly jumped back in fear. It barked, then tried again, then retreated again. The monk stopped and observed. The reason became clear. The dog was seeing its own reflection in the water and mistook it for another dog. It believed the figure in the pond was a threat, an enemy, guarding the water. But in truth, there was no other dog, only its own reflection. Again and again the dog tried. Again and again, fear held it back. Until finally, the dog paused. It stopped barking, then suddenly it leapt with full force into the pond. The reflection vanished. The fear disappeared. The dog drank freely, happily wagging its tail. The monk stood still, deeply moved. In that moment, he realized our greatest fears don't come from the outside world. They come from within our own minds. We often think someone or something is holding us back. But in truth, the one holding us back is us. How many times in life have you stepped back because of fear? How many times have you told yourself you weren't good enough, smart enough, strong enough? We look at the surface of the pond and see a threat, but it's only a reflection of our own doubts. Life doesn't wait for you to feel ready. There will always be a reflection, always a reason to hesitate. But sometimes all it takes is one moment of courage, one leap like that dog made, and suddenly you realize nothing was ever standing in your way. If a stray dog can find the courage to leap past the fear in its own mind, then you, with all your logic, love, and dreams, what are you still waiting for? The monk's next teacher is someone no one would expect, a man who lived in the dark but taught him how to see the light. A lesson from a thief. When hope lives in the dark. Sometimes life sends us teachers in the most unexpected forms. They don't always come with kind faces or good reputations. Not every lesson is taught by someone good, but the beauty of life is this: light can shine even in the darkest places if we're willing to look with our hearts, not our judgment. The monk in this story had an unforgettable encounter one night. He had arrived in a remote village late in the evening. The streets were empty, the temples were closed, and the air was heavy with silence. As he wandered through the dark, searching for a place to rest, he saw a man chipping away at a wall. Approaching him calmly, the monk asked, "Brother, can you tell me where I can find the nearest temple? I'm a traveler in need of shelter." The man chuckled and said, "I'm not a builder, I'm a thief. I'm trying to break into this house, but you look tired. If you're not afraid, you can come rest at my place." A thief offering shelter to a monk. It sounded ridiculous, but the monk accepted. What he witnessed over the next few nights changed him forever. Every night, the man would pray before heading out to steal, sincerely asking for success. And every night he returned empty-handed. He didn't complain. He simply said, "Today wasn't my day, but tomorrow I'll definitely succeed." Day after day, his determination never faded, and one night he finally returned with a handful of stolen goods. But instead of celebrating, he just smiled quietly, as if he had simply crossed another checkpoint on a long journey. The monk was deeply moved, not by the act of stealing, but by the man's unwavering hope and persistence. He gently suggested that the thief use that same determination for something honest, and he did. He left behind his old life and started a small, honest business. From within darkness, he found light. The monk realized something profound. The lesson wasn't just about right or wrong, it was about never giving up. People can make mistakes, but if they still hold on to belief, to hope, to the desire to change, then transformation is always possible. If a thief could pray before doing something wrong and still find his way back to light, then you, with all your chances and awareness, what's stopping you from stepping into what's right? The monk's next teacher wasn't a person or even a living thing, but it taught him one of the greatest truths about himself. When wisdom doesn't come from books, but from the most ordinary things, we often associate wisdom with lofty things, profound lectures, thick books, complex philosophies. We believe that only those who are highly educated or well-read can teach us something truly valuable. But the old monk in the story came to understand a very different truth. He once thought he was wise. He believed that only sages and renowned teachers were worthy of learning from. But then it was a child, a dog, and a thief, none of whom held any status in society, who each taught him lessons that no scripture ever could. The child taught him humility, that true understanding only begins when the ego ends. The dog taught him about fear in the mind, that what often holds us back is nothing more than a reflection of our own doubt. The thief taught him faith and perseverance, that even when someone walks through darkness, they can still find light as long as they don't give up hope. None of them were perfect. They didn't have titles, complex philosophies, or reputations that made them worthy of being called teachers. Yet through their actions, through their very way of being, they awakened something in the monk that no formal teaching ever had. And he realized life teaches us through experience, not theory. A child's question, a dog's leap, a thief's nightly prayer, these were the real lectures, the sacred truths hidden in everyday moments. The most powerful lessons don't live in the books you read, but in the way you live. They don't come from someone else's words. but from the way you observe, feel, and learn from the little things every single day. If a child, a dog, and a thief could each teach a monk the deepest lessons of his life, could it be that something completely ordinary around you today is quietly trying to teach you something that matters, and you just haven't noticed it yet? The next teacher said nothing at all, but made the monk stop and truly face himself. Experience, the silent teacher. You never forget. There are things people say that we soon forget. There's advice we hear but ignore. But there's one teacher we all carry with us for life. One with no name, no face, and no words. That teacher is experience. In the story of the old monk, he shared how he was taught by the most unlikely figures: a child, a dog, a thief. But behind each of those people, what truly etched the lessons into his heart was the experience he went through. The child simply blew out a candle and asked a question. But had the monk not felt the sting of being humbled by pure, innocent wisdom, he wouldn't have truly learned humility. The dog merely jumped into a pond. But if the monk hadn't stood there and watched fear be overcome by courage, he would have missed the truth about the mind's illusions. The thief only shared his thoughts each night. But if the monk hadn't stayed in that dark room, witnessed hope in someone who had lost their way, he wouldn't have understood the power of persistence and change. We often believe that words can change people, but the truth is, it's what we live through that truly transforms us. A failure teaches more than 1,000 warnings. A tear teaches deeper than 100 kind words. One hard fall teaches strength better than any textbook. And maybe that's why we never forget our own experiences. They etch themselves into memory, touch the heart, and shape who we are, quietly but powerfully. Life doesn't need to explain anything to us. It just lets us live, stumble, feel. And if we're awake enough, open enough, humble enough, then every moment becomes a classroom, every mistake a chapter. If experience, whether painful or disappointing, is the teacher we never forget, what part of your life right now is trying to teach you a lesson you're still refusing to face? Keep listening, because the next teacher may not come to teach you something new, but to remind you of who you really are. An open mind and a humble heart, the true gateway to wisdom. There's something curious about life. The more we think we know, the harder it becomes to truly learn. The more we try to prove ourselves, the bigger our ego grows, and the narrower the door to growth becomes. The old monk in the story was once a man proud of his knowledge. He was disciplined, wise, and respected, just the way society often praises. But deep inside, there was still an invisible wall, a silent ego that believed he was too wise to learn anything from those beneath him. Until he met a child with a candle, a dog by a pond, and a thief in the middle of the night. None of them were who he expected to become his teachers, but each of them knocked gently on the door of his heart and made him open to a truth he had not learned in all his years of spiritual study: humility and the willingness to learn from anyone. The child made him realize how limited his prideful thinking was. The dog forced him to confront fear within his own mind. The thief, someone most would look down on, showed him the quiet power of faith and perseverance. Each of those lessons only came because the monk was willing to pause, observe, and listen. Not because of the other person's status, not because of philosophy or teachings, but because his heart finally opened. We're no different. Someone we overlook may be carrying a lesson we desperately need. A simple mistake, a quiet glance, or an innocent question might hold the breakthrough we've been seeking all along. But to receive that gift, we must approach life with a mind that is open and a heart that is humble, without arrogance, without judgment. Because sometimes the greatest teacher won't appear as a wise sage, but as something we once dismissed. If the monk had never opened his heart, would he ever have learned the lessons that transformed his life? What about you? How long has it been since you looked at the world with truly open eyes? And how many silent teachers have you already missed on your journey? Stay with me, because the next teacher says nothing at all, yet will leave you speechless as you finally face yourself. No one can grow for you. Only you can walk the path to enlightenment. There's a truth that becomes clearer the longer we live. No one can live your life for you, and no one can truly learn your lessons for you. The deepest lessons in life don't come from what others teach. They come from what you have truly lived through. The old monk in the story said, because he had no single master, life itself became his greatest teacher. He had read books, he had listened to wise teachings, but nothing stayed with him as deeply as the moments he had to face things for himself, feel them fully, and come to his own understanding. No one could explain the emptiness of pride until he stood in silence before a child's honest question. No one could define fear as clearly as the moment he watched a dog frightened by its own reflection in the water. No one could teach him what faith and perseverance looked like until he lived beside a thief who, despite being lost, never gave up hope. These experiences didn't arrive all at once. They came unexpectedly, sometimes in the dark, sometimes in the light. And from them, the monk learned a truth greater than all. True wisdom can't be handed down in words. It must be lived. It must be felt. It must be broken open from within. Just like the journey of the Buddha, no one could give him enlightenment. He had to walk the path himself. He had to go through every temptation, every illusion, and sit beneath the Bodhi tree to face his own mind. And so do we. Books may give us knowledge, others may offer advice, but only we can do the inner work that truly transforms us. If even the Buddha had to walk the path himself to reach enlightenment, then you, on your own journey through life, have you truly learned from your experiences, or are you still waiting for someone else to teach you instead? Up next comes a teacher with no voice, no face, but one who made the monk stop and truly look into the depths of his own mind. Sometimes the signs we're waiting for don't come with flashing lights or loud voices. They come through silence, through a moment that makes you pause, through a story that feels a little too close to home. This was one of those stories, and maybe, just maybe, it wasn't a coincidence that you heard it today. Maybe life is trying to remind you that you're not as lost as you think, that every step you've taken, even the painful ones, have been leading you somewhere deeper, somewhere truer, somewhere you were always meant to be. So before you scroll away, take a moment, breathe, reflect, and ask yourself, what lesson is life trying to teach me right now? Because the moment you start listening is the moment everything begins to change.